second annual chocolate festival, and we already have plans for our third and fourth, and building more and more and more. And our hopes are to continue to bring more educational components for both professional and enthusiast alike. So our first presenter here, Lauren Steffen, we first were introduced to her at our last chocolate festival. We had our presenters in from town, and Chef Raper put on a great private dinner for us, but the highlight of that dinner was dessert. And so when we asked to meet the pastry chef and young Lauren came out, we were all like, we've got to get you involved. So brilliant young mind, enthusiastic, hip on all the latest techniques, but likes that old school stuff too. And we look forward to building a nice, strong relationship with Lauren here in this community. She's going to start teaching for us over at Virginia Western some classes, and look for her on the horizon. She's an up-and-coming budding star. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right.
And thank you for being here, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. All right, so I'm Lauren Steffen. I'm the pastry chef here at the hotel, and what I basically do is I'm in charge of pretty much all desserts. I've learned in my career, I've been doing this professionally for about 7 years, that chefs who do the savory side of things, they either like doing desserts or they really hate it and just want to push it to someone else, which is terrific for me because that means I get to be creative and come up with new things and can pretty much do whatever I want. And job security also. It's not like, oh, because the chef knows that if they want to get rid of me, then they're going to have to start doing all this work. So it works pretty well. So here I am in charge of the desserts in the Regency room, which is our main dining room. We do, I work with lunch and dinner, and dinner is sort of my baby. I want to make sure every plate of dessert that comes out is really top notch and as good as I could possibly make it. And yeah, so then most of our business actually comes through doing banquets, which will have anywhere from a 10-person banquet to a 900-person banquet, and we'll just be in charge of making sure all the desserts that go out are exactly the same, and every single person gets treated from the first plate we do to the last plate we do is all identical. And that's it's a fun challenge, but really what I'm all about is plated desserts from any end of it. So I'll talk a little bit about, before just getting to, oh, this is how you put the elements on the plate, I'm going to tell you a little bit how I come up with desserts, because it's not just go and pick random things. There's some thought process behind it. So the first thing I think about is the flavor, and in a dessert you've got the level of sweetness, you've got acidity, salt, and savory or bitter flavors as you see fit in a dessert. So sometimes you want a dessert that's very sweet, or an element that is just, there's a lot of sweetness, so you can balance it against something acidic. For example, a lemon meringue tart. You've got the very tart lemon curd in the middle, but then a very sweet meringue on top to counteract that. So the dessert flavors, you can actually taste them a lot better when you add salt. And I've learned from a lot of the savory chefs that I've worked with that incorporating some savory elements like a lemon basil. I'm really harping on lemon today, I guess. Lemon basil is a really nice touch. And then there are things, we're talking about chocolate, of course, because it's the chocolate festival. And we've got cocoa nibs, which are the predecessor to cocoa powder and actual cocoa, which they're very bitter, but they have a distinct chocolate flavor, and they're a really nice counterpoint. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I have cocoa nib brittle here that is just like a butter crunch, kind of like a peanut brittle would be, but it's also got the more bitter cocoa nibs in it. And then, so that's most of the flavor. And then you also need to put together a dessert that's got a nice balance of something very, very strong flavored and something a little more mild. So you kind of incorporate a palate cleanser into the plate. My example for this is when I was a kid, I still love peppermint ice cream, and at Christmas time, my father would scoop out ice cream, and he'd put 2 scoops in the bowl, and he'd put 1 vanilla and 1 peppermint. And I'd be like, no, I want both peppermint. And he's like, no, if you eat 1 bite of peppermint and then 1 bite of vanilla, the peppermint will taste stronger every single time you eat it. And he was right, because he's my father and I was 8 years old. So that's pretty much all that I think about in the flavors of a dessert every time I come up with a dessert. So the next thing we've got is textures, and that's very important for all aspects of food. I like textures. I think are most important. Well, desserts are always most important to me, but when I'm making a salad, I really want to make sure I've got something like creamy and fatty, and then something crunchy to go along and make the entire experience a little more interesting. So we've got you can have in desserts like a soft texture, like a cheesecake would be good, and then you've got a very smooth texture, which isn't quite the same, because the soft one you're thinking is not going to be really difficult to chew. A smooth one might be a little chewier, but still have a distinct flavor. Then you got a good crispy flavor, which is or texture, which is more of a Rice Krispie treat. Obviously, there's crispy in the name. And then there's crunchy, which you get when you got, well, in my example, I've got fouilletine, which is a French crepe that's been cooked until it's very crispy, and it can be incorporated into anything that doesn't have water in it, and it'll stay crispy forever. I've got a container of them back in the kitchen that have been here since before I got here, and they're still terrific. And then you've got, of course, a chewy component, and all of these things. A good example for how you can see these all represented is in the perfect chocolate chip cookie, which in my perfect chocolate chip cookie, I just take a measuring cup and go in my kitchen and throw in whatever sounds good. I like pecans and maraschino cherries and sprinkles. That's just my preferred flavors. But you've got, for a chocolate chip cookie, you've got the soft inner part of the cookie, the smooth chocolate throughout it. You've got crispy elements inside it if you're going to have, well, crispy is only sometimes, I guess, with those. And crunchy, usually the outer edge of the cookie, and chewy, it's kind of like the middle section, like the ring around the center. And so that's what I think about with textures. And then the next part of the plated dessert, we've got temperature, which is also a lot of fun. And I was talking to my executive chef yesterday. I went over this all with him, and he had his insight on it. And I told him, I was like, that's where I really can sort of vary you guys, because you guys, if it's hot food, you want all the food hot. You might want, there's some elements that you could probably put a sorbet in a soup to have a contrast, but mostly hot food is hot, and so I get to have fun with that. So I like to go for everything frozen to cool to room temperature to warm to hot, and if you can incorporate all of those into one dessert, it just makes the entire thing more dimensional and a lot more interesting to eat. So what I have as an example, well, there are also some limitations. So when we do banquet desserts and have to make sure that everyone gets the exact same dessert, and of course we can't make it to the minute every single time, so we've got to make it, a couple hours ahead and leave it in the fridge, or sometimes they get set on the table in front of the guest, and so they have to be all the same temperature, and it's a lot of times a much more simple dessert. So we'll have cheesecake with raspberry sauce and chocolate curls or something like that, that'll still get us different elements in texture and flavor, but the temperature will all be one and the same. All right, and so that's pretty much all I think of when I come up with a new dessert, just as far as the flavors go. And then we move on to the next part, which is what you're probably thinking when you signed up for a plated dessert class, and that's the visual appeal. And the first thing I like to talk about is sauce styles, and I'll give you some examples of those. On this plate, I'll tilt it up for you. Use raspberry. So, my favorite tool to use is, I would say, a spoon, because it's, well, I've got like 60 of them, and it's just easiest to find, and when you misplace it, you don't have to go searching for another one too far. So one of my favorite ones to do is just go straight across like that on the plate. It's very simple, one motion, and then similar to that is it's doing kind of a curve. And you can see that while they're the same thing essentially, they give a different impression. So this one, you might want to put a dessert set on the very end, or one on each end, whereas this dessert you might want to, or this sauce, you might want to set it right here in the negative space that you've created. And Then there's always paintbrushes, which are also one of my favorites, and I got a lot of crafty paintbrushes so that the savory guys wouldn't steal them for garlic oil and barbecue sauce. And so that you can go across, and it'll have a similar feel as this one, but sort of a different texture, and then you can do other sort of interesting patterns with it. And then I've also got this sponge, which I learned is a lot of fun to give a similar texture as the first one, but it's actually usually a little bit easier to work with. So that's some of them. And then I've got also what you can do without using any of these tools with just the bottle by itself. This lid might actually pop off, so bear with me. So one of them you can do is progressively sized dots. You can do like a small, medium, large, and then it's a little runny for that. And then you can put like small and medium and large desserts with it. Ooh. And then there's also just straight lines, which will add one part of a dessert to the next. We've got a function coming up at the beginning of April where we're having the Roanoke Symphony here, and they provided us with their invitation, which happened to be a diamond shape that was cut into quarters. So for their dessert, or not quite quarters, for their dessert we're going to draw a line straight down the plate and one there, put each element to represent the invitation that they gave us. So that's one way that lines can be really useful. And then there's also zigzags, which are kind of like this, which I personally have found over the years that I really don't like, because I feel like they're kind of dated, and then also when we're doing a lot of plated desserts, it's kind of tough on your hand. So it's one of those things that it's like, well, it's a little more difficult anyway, and I don't like the look that much, so I'm just going to go with something else completely. But that's something that that people will use, and then they'll vary it up a little. Like the cooks on the line like to do zigzags of one. That'll go there for a while. And then zigzags of something else. And then take a skewer or something and go kind of smear it together to incorporate the two and make it look kind of more of a plaid pattern. And it's a lot of sauce on a plate, which some people really like. So that's a lot of the different styles of sauce that I do. If I had to pick a favorite, I would say it's this curvy one, because I just like that one best. And then the next thing that we put just for visual appeal would be garnishes, and that's something that everyone in the kitchen uses and has to think about. And the garnishes should relate to the dessert, but they don't have to be crucial to it. For example, we've got tuiles, which are a type of cookie. It's a very thin, buttery batter that you can smear on a cookie sheet and then bake it until it's just brown around the edges, and then it's still pliable. It's basically what you make a fortune cookie out of. But fortune cookies have a specific way of folding and incorporating the little piece of paper. So these, I took my tuile batter in a piping bag and just drew a straight line and then baked it for about 4 minutes and pulled it off and wrapped it around a handle of a wooden spoon. And you got this. So then when you have a dessert that you're plating and you need a little more height or just contrast to the shapes on the plate, you could do something like this, just set up on it. And you can do that with chocolate and sugar as well. Chocolate, they're actually more fragile. I find tuiles to be the sturdiest of those three. And they're useful to help with the height and the texture. And then they should also be kind of practical. I always find it strange when I'm given a dessert and it's just got something that doesn't seem to make sense, that it's just like, oh, just a stick of caramel set on there. And then you have some more traditional garnishes, such as powdered sugar and mint leaves, which we've seen over and over again. And I think that they can be nice, but they need to be used appropriately. So I I've got a bread pudding on the menu in the Regency room that I sprinkle powdered sugar over just to make sure it looks clean when it goes on the plate. And mint leaves, I worked at a Cuban restaurant in Philly for a while where we put a mint leaf on everything, which was acceptable because we drank mojitos like crazy in that place. So there was always mint around, and I could pick off the nice, pretty little mint blossoms and give the rest to the bartender. But the only time I really have used mint leaf here was when I did a mint ice cream with a sweet tea baklava. And so it was just a garnish that represented the flavor. And now onto the next category that I'm looking at when I plate a dessert is the shapes and the sizes. Now you can have something that's all the same. That's a popular technique. You can have 4 different types of textures of a dessert, such as like cubes. You can have a cube of like a panna cotta, which is a gelatin set cream, something like a cake, and maybe some chocolate and some ice cream. But if they're all exactly the same in dimension, it gives a really nice visual appeal. But they can always all be different, which is what I tend toward more, because perfection is a little harder to achieve when you've got so many comparisons. It's like it's kind of like, well, no, I'll get there in a minute. I've learned in my studying of this and of some art history that odd numbers tend to be more visual appealing. So I remember my dad took me to an art museum when I was a kid and told me to count all the different colored flowers in a certain, painting of a vase, and it was like, oh, well, there are 3 blue ones, and there are 5 yellow ones, and there are 9 red ones, and it was like, well, they're all odd numbers because your eyes balance odd numbers better. And there's a rule in photography where you want your subject to be in 1/3 of the picture and the background to be in the remaining 2/3. So it's something that just you can incorporate from other facets of art, which is food is really just art a little more practically. And to continue on the art thought is think about when you go to a modern art exhibit. Some of the paintings will be very even squares and lines, and you can tell that someone was very calculated with it. And it almost looks like it might be something more like architecture, where it's clearly level and lined up because that's the practical way to go to keep things from falling over. And then you'll see something that's more of a complete chaotic mess, but it's still visually appealing, like a Jackson Pollock with the paint, different colors of paint splash everywhere. So you can do that same sort of thing with desserts, where you can have one that's very clean, or you can have one that's very messy but still deliberate. And with the messy but deliberate thing, what I tend to tell my cooks is to make sure you make it look like a grown-up did it. Because if you make it look like a 3-year-old put it on a plate, someone's going to say, well, this looks like a 3-year-old put this on the plate. Not that 3-year-olds can't plate desserts, I'm sure there's some out there who make it look real nice. Height is another thing that I've mentioned a few times. It's just really, you don't need a dessert to be tall on a plate, but if you can accomplish that, it just makes the person eating the dessert just a lot more impressed, and it's just like wow, that's a really neat way of putting that together. And then another thing that we think about more in the professional part of the field than maybe at home is the plate choice. And I've got over here 3 plates that I use frequently. This one's just a big square. You can fit a lot, or you can fit a little to have a really big impact of negative space on it. Then this is the round plate that we used to plate hundreds and hundreds of desserts on for banquets. So this is not ideal to me personally, just because I see it so often that it gets kind of old. But it works really well for my favorite sauce swoops. So if we've got like a circle of sauce there, and then we've got like a salted caramel tart put there and some chocolate curls, it still looks very nice on the plate, or even something like cheesecake, which I would say we plate up most frequently. Sometimes we do a straight line across the plate and put the cheesecake on it, and then something like a praline dust will go on there. But then my favorite plate in our kitchen here is this long rectangle, and I don't actually know why I like it other than the fact that it's interesting, and you can fit a lot or a little dessert on here and it still looks appropriate. So I'll plate up one of my desserts on this. Actually, both of the desserts that I'm going to be showing y'all I designed on this plate, but one of them I'll put on the other one just for contrast. Let's see. How to eat the dessert is another one. I was talking to my executive chef, and he mentioned that he went to a restaurant recently where the chef came out and explained how you're supposed to eat the food, and he was a little bit irritated by that, because for him it was more of a, well, I know how to eat, I'm just going to eat it however I want, and it needs to be delicious no matter how they eat it. So if you've got 3 different elements and you intend for them to have them all separately or have a tiny bit of each in every bite, it needs to still yield very delicious results. And it should definitely not be alienating. I found that out when I first started here. I had a dessert that was, it was actually on the big square plate. It was a lemon basil shortbread cookie with lemon curd piped on it, and then I had dried meringue, berry paper, and berry marshmallows that were all kind of stuck in at random angles, and then there was basil sauce painted on the plate. And it just looked, I thought it looked very interesting, and the rest of the kitchen really liked it, but when people got it, they were kind of like, well, how do I go for this? Do I scoop everything off or just kind of chop it up? And we ended up taking it off the menu about 6 weeks later just because it wasn't selling very well. Now I see some of you here are professionals and students, and some are at home amateurs, which is terrific. I'm glad to see everyone here. And there's some things that you do at home, some substitutions you can make from professional ingredients that can still be interesting. And then there are techniques that you know from home that you can incorporate. For example, has anyone here ever made puppy chow, or what'd you say it's also called? Snowman poo. And Meredith, you said it was called white trash? Mm-hmm. No, you said that. I don't know. It's the thing where you mix peanut butter and chocolate and Chex Mix and powdered sugar. So that's something that's tasty, and we've all eaten like ridiculous amounts of it at Christmas time. But I did that, and I took melted chocolate and some homemade Oreo crumbs that I had and tossed that together and let it harden. And then I found that was like a really strong kind of bittersweet component, and I incorporated that into some ice cream that I used in the middle of a baked Alaska to give it more flavor. So it's something that I knew how to do because I've done it so many times, but then I just changed it a little bit. And I was telling my sister yesterday about just incorporating, yeah, she's there. I mean, look at her. You're welcome. I was telling her yesterday about using Oreo crumbs in puppy chow, and she was just like, that changes everything. It's great, I'm gonna do that. Between different flavors that you might, and then there's some things that we all know how to make, such as, or well, not necessarily all know how to make, but something that people have been making forever, that like my grandma makes a terrific lemon meringue pie. And I took a recipe and I was like, you know what I want to do? Grapefruit. And it was a little different, and it had a completely different flavor profile, but it was something that you can just make a pretty much 1-for-1 substitute. I think I had to add a little more sugar. Like a 1-for-1 substitute, and it was just something new from something that I'd had 100 times before. And something that I was trying to think of, choosing your plates at home. For me, I've got round plates, 3 different sizes. That's pretty much it. I've got nothing that I could serve a lot of different people on. But then I was just looking around and thinking, what is not a plate that, as long as it's clean, I could serve it. I would serve a dessert to someone on. And of course, you can move and look at glasses, which I've got some fancy beer glasses and different kinds of that. But then I looked around and I was like, well, I have like 8 of those picture frames. I could just take the pictures out and serve a dessert on a picture frame, and it'd be something that whoever I'm serving it to just looks at it and is like, wow, this fits really nicely on this square plate. So just you could look around your house and be creative and come up with completely new ways to put together desserts. So now I'm going to show you the desserts that I have prepped here. The first one that I'm going to do is this citrus and chocolate dessert that kind of plays with different temperatures as well as textures and flavors and all of those things that we talked about earlier. So the first part of it I've got here, and I'm going to let you in on a secret. I accidentally lost the real component of this, but it looks kind of like this, and it will be served warm. When I originally came up with this dessert, it was a warm lemon basil chocolate pot de creme, but this is just ganache. But you don't have to tell anyone. And so that'll be the first part of it. The second is a white chocolate and lime pavlova. A pavlova is an Australian dessert, actually, because we don't get a whole lot of culinary stuff out of Australia. And this is a meringue, so it's whipped egg whites with sugar and a little cornstarch and flavoring added. And then I folded in chopped up white chocolate and just put it in the oven for about 2 hours at a very low temperature to dry it out, so it's crispy and delightful. I love pavlovas. I've got here some lime curd, which is my recipe for lemon curd, but with limes instead. See, I'll just fill it up with a little spoonful, and then to use the same color, I garnish it with kiwi fruit, which is a nice way of. I didn't talk about color at all. All right, well, I'll go ahead and add in the part about color. You need to have different colors on the plate, or you can have all the same color on the plate. Sometimes I've learned that I use certain kinds of sauces more for the color than for the flavor, but that's really not the way I want to work. So I changed the banquet menu recently so that every single dessert has a different color profile, so no matter what they pick, it'll be interesting and different. So this dessert will have, I'll point out all the colors when we're looking at it and why I used them. So here's the kiwi and the lime and the white chocolate pavlova. And then the third item I had was ice cream. And this is a little tuile that I baked and then set inside a cup to make it cup shaped to hold my ice cream, which is not melted. Thanks, Leah. So I've got a nice little ice cream scoop. And this is milk chocolate orange caramel ice cream, which is a mouthful, but it's might be the most delicious ice cream I've ever made. I made it up at a restaurant that I worked at a couple years ago, and I've tried to make it everywhere I work ever since, just to show off. So I usually plate this. I've got this chocolate caramel sauce, which is something that I was working on for a while here at the hotel. It's caramel sauce is one of my favorite things to plate with because it doesn't dry up, and it usually goes across the plate nice and smoothly. So I added chocolate, and you get a delicious chocolate sauce with a little bit more flavor. So for that, I just take it straight across the plate. And then I take the warm lemon basil pot de creme, set it one spot, take the pavlova, put it in the middle because this is warm. This is room temperature shell and cold lime curd, and my ice cream, and put that on the end. And then to represent the flavor of the kiwi, because I always find that kiwis and raspberries and passion fruit for that matter have similar flavor profiles where they're similar in acidity and strength, so they can actually be substituted for one another very easily, or they can be married together without one overpowering the other. And I like to do 3 different size dots, something like that. So this is what I would do as for a full plated dessert. We had this on a special function back in November. So that's the first one that I'll show you. The second one that I'll show you is one, oh, this also goes through different kinds of chocolate, because this is a chocolate festival after all. So this is dark chocolate, this is white, and incorporated in here is milk chocolate. So you get all the different flavors and see how they pair with different kinds of citrus. And since citrus is a winter fruit, it was appropriate when I came up with it in November, but it's still, you can serve it year round. People always like lemonade in the summer. The next one that I'll show you, I came up with for the chocolate festival back when someone first asked me about it, Chef Shop, I guess. The bottom layer I've got is, this is a cocoa sponge cake, I like that one best. So I took my normal sponge cake recipe and added some chocolate and cocoa powder to give it a nice chocolate flavor. So that's the bottom. And then here I've got ganache that I just, ganache next, yeah. Kind of pipe on to add some richness. Then this is the milk chocolate and fouilletine layer, which will give a lot of crunch. The milk chocolate has cocoa butter stirred into it, which makes it very fluid and easy to mix other elements into it. So I'll put that layer on it, and I cut these all out with the same size round cutter to make it so they stack up so nicely. This is a white chocolate mousse that I made, and I just want to put some dots all around this, kind of like pillars to hold up the top layer, which is a tempered chocolate circle with a fun pattern on it that we get transfer sheets in. I'm sure you stick around today, you'll learn a lot more about tempering chocolate. It's not something that I really like to do, so I try to avoid it. We just put that on top. So the main element of the dessert looks like this. It's got different colors, textures, flavors, levels of sweetness. There's not a whole lot of acidity in there, but sometimes with chocolate you can leave out the acidity because people just really love chocolate. Then the way I plate this, I have a circle of the same chocolate caramel sauce. I take my spoon and I just go in an angle all across the plate. It always makes me think of kind of a shooting star, and we've got this as a plate up for something on the menu currently. Then I will use this sauce for a little bit of glue on either end. So this spot is where we'll put the cake assembly. In this spot I'll put, these are some chocolate crumbs, which to put ice cream on a plate, it's easiest to put sauce on the plate to hold the crumbs in place, and the crumbs to hold the ice cream in place. Because if you don't do that, the ice cream will just slide around. And in restaurants, you don't really want a server taking it out and the ice cream's clear across the plate, or on the floor for that matter. So this is chocolate sorbet. It's really rich. Sometimes when you make, when you're dealing with chocolate, you incorporate cream and dairy. For example, everything has dairy in it. Well, not quite those. I didn't use butter, but this has heavy cream. This ganache is heavy cream in here. So using a sorbet that doesn't involve any dairy allows the flavor of the chocolate to sing through without any real interruption. So that goes right on that spot. And that's pretty much, oh no, the coconut griddle is something that'll add a lot of texture to this dessert, and I kind of like to put it across here because I think it kind of mirrors this shooting star, kind of like the Milky Way between the planets. I was just thinking of planets when I came up with that one. So there are a couple of other small things that I do here. When we do buffets, we plate mostly on this plate because you can fit 24 of them on a sheet tray, and space is always an issue in professional kitchens. So I'm gonna just plate up something little on here. Should have a little bit again. So this is an example of having each part of the dessert stand out separately. This I will probably put on the buffet tomorrow because I made like 30 of them. I don't really have a use for it unless y'all want to eat them, which I would be totally fine with. So something like this would be what we would put out on a buffet. Simple, still really nice, kind of refreshing and a little lighter. And then there's the old standby of doing cheesecake and oh, I forgot to do that. Oh, that's a fun dessert way. All right, so one of my other way that I really like to sauce them is using one of these small offset spatulas, and this is what I kind of did for when Chef Shop and all of them came here last year. I've got a plate where I have a circle of dark chocolate sauce and a circle of caramel sauce. And then I use a spatula to kind of blend them, smear them together, which has a nice effect. They kind of blend into each other. You can get different colors on the plate. The first place that I worked that they did this, it was a green tea sauce with the chocolate, so it was a nice green color on the plate to go with a layered cake. And for that I can add something like this cheesecake, which we bring in, but I'm not really ashamed of that, so I'll show it. And something like this we would do for maybe a function in the Regency room, because these plates are a little less practical for banquets. I would probably give it a little more. In fact, I'll show you a really neat technique for plating, or for adding whipped cream to a plate, and that's a traditional French technique called a quenelle, which is Quenelle, because no one can ever quite figure out how to spell it after I say it. So this is just whipped cream in a bowl, and these are warm spoons, because this is hot water. You could take whipped cream and add it to a dessert in a piping bag with a star tip, which is very popular and very practical, but I think this has a more polished, professional look. So you have a warm spoon, and you just kind of scoop it and run it along the side of the bowl. This is a little full. I took my spatula up there yesterday to get that ice cream out, didn't I? So you scoop a little bit, run it along the side of a bowl, and you get this really nice kind of football egg shape. And a lot of people do it with using 2 spoons, kind of scooping it and then taking the first one and the second one and going back and forth like this, which creates a nice 3-sided shape, but I don't think it looks very pastry-y. I think it looks more like you're gonna put together salsa or mustard or blue cheese. That's what I usually see them do this for. So I like the smooth quenelle technique a lot better. And I make all of the cooks that are doing, because on the Regency line, the savory cooks plate up all of the desserts. It's just we don't quite do enough business to have our own pastry cook. So I make all of the cooks learn how to do that, and I know that the next job they go to, if they have to plate up desserts and they can already do that, their boss is going to be impressed. So it's something that is a good technique to impress your boss. That's pretty much what I got for you. Does anyone have any questions? Yes,
The
go for
whole
it.
cookie or whatever you were talking about that lasts forever,
Mm-hmm.
can you spell that? Sounded like guillotine. But
Yeah, it's guillotine with an F instead of a G.
Okay.
Feuillotine, thing.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That sounds. Yeah, it means feuille. Feuille means layer in French, right? Anyone? I think so. Because millefeuille, which is a Napoleon, is a multiple layered dessert. Yeah, that's something, I'm not sure if there's anywhere around here that you can really get that, but I'm sure the internet can provide it. And I ate some like cereal yesterday, which was really tasty, just with milk over it, a spoon. Anything else? All right. Well, if anyone wants to come up here and try any of this, I have a bunch of spoons, and I have plenty of elements to make more. So come on up here if you like. This is the best breakfast. Take it from me. I eat this every day.